In this episode, Susan Tay interviews her co-director at OTP Law Corporation, Lim Seng Siew, along with special guests Alvin and Jocelyn Khoo. The interview explores the long-standing professional relationship between the two co-founders of a business and their trusted advisor, Seng Siew, dating back to before 1999. Listen in on why a trusted advisor is invaluable to any business.
We will start with each one of you introducing yourself. Seng Siew, you want to start?
Sure. My name is Lim Seng Siew. I've been in practice for 20 or 30 years. I'm basically a disputes lawyer, but I also help many of our clients with their businesses. That includes startups. I have a particular love for technology, so quite a number of my clients are in the technology area. I even had spent a few years outside the legal industry running a startup. Well, okay, not totally outside the legal industry. It's a legal tech startup, but it's way before the present love affair with legal technology. In those days, this was in the turn of the century, the year 2000, 1999, 2000, when unfortunately technology was not quite ready. And so there were quite a number of hiccups. But those were exciting times, perhaps a little bit young and foolish. But that experience of running a company, a startup, helped me later on in my career when I start speaking to clients. Because when they tell me a problem, I have a context in which to place it. I don't have to approach it from just being purely a lawyer, because I have those experiences that come with me. And when I tell clients, oh yeah, I understand the difficulty you're going through, it's not just me saying it for the sake of saying it, because I say it because I have actually experienced difficulties in trying to run a business. It didn't stop there, because after doing my own business, I also spent a few years with the Singapore Academy of Law. Singapore Academy of Law is an interesting creature. It's a statutory board. Its job is to promote the legal industry, and I was helping them run their technology cluster. Was there for quite a few years. Interesting, because that's when you start looking at the cutting edge of technology, not just related to the legal field, but looking at cutting edge technology in many, many different fields, and seeing how some of these technology can be adapted for the legal industry. Okay, so that was an eye-opener, an interesting one. But after all those years of dabbling with other sorts of business, I had to come back to my true calling, or I like to call it that, my true calling, coming back to law. So after those years, I came back to the legal industry. I came back to the firm that I have left before doing all these things. And as they say, the rest is history. I've been here since then, running this law firm. One of the most interesting experiences I have was in the very, very early days of the .com. I think we were probably one of the first law firms to set up our own website. And we had a client, a listed company coming in from Europe, who was trying to decide whether to set up in the Asia Pacific or to set up in America. And they contacted us via email. And we then started a conversation with them about the advantages of expanding into the Asia Pacific. So that was input for them to make a decision whether to expand into this part of the world or to expand into America. And thankfully for me, they decided that Asia Pacific probably had greater opportunities for them. And it was through those conversations that we had with them that they decided to headquarter in Singapore to drive their Asia Pacific business. It's a technology and consulting company. So when they came here, we helped them with firstly setting up the entities. We helped them with putting in place policies for their employees that they brought in, especially with their expats. We also helped them with applications for employment pass, work permits for their overseas employees, as well as the kind of benefits that these people should properly have. And because they wanted to expand into the Asia Pacific region, we also helped them with the kinds of structures that is best put in place for them to take advantage of that. Okay, So a simple example, whether to set themselves up as a subsidiary in Singapore or just to run a branch office in Singapore, because they have a lot of ambitions to expand into the region. It thought that it may make more sense for them to actually set up a wholly owned subsidiary in Singapore. And some of the beauty about Singapore is that we have fairly open and liberal inward investment policies. So, they could do that. There was no requirements for them to have local shareholders. They just needed a resident director. And, so long as one of their employees was going to take up employment paths in Singapore, that person would have qualified as a resident director. So, and that's what we advised them, and that's how they've set it up. And when they expanded across into Malaysia, when they expanded across into Thailand, all the way into China, we help them talk to the right people so that they can also make a well-informed decision whether to, again, set up as a subsidiary in those countries or set up as a branch. And because there were tax implications involved in that, we also brought in tax advisors and accountants to help them with their decision-making.
That's Seng Siew. Alvin?
Hi, my name is Alvin Khoo. I was born in Malaysia, Penang. I came to Singapore at a very young age and I've been here ever since. My wife and I, we wanted to go into business. Short of asking her to join me in construction and engineering, I figured that I should join her, and she's in human services. So we actually started a childcare business back in 1991. Then over the years, we established ourselves as an authority in terms of how the brain works, how children grow. And then we had a breakthrough in 1999 when we met Professor Makoto Shichida from Japan. That was when we started getting involved in this program that we brought in from Japan called the Shichida Method. And we have been doing that ever since.
I know Shichida Method quite well. I've watched a TV program about Shichida Method, and it's amazing skills that they can impart to children. Where I can never forget the time when it was about this child looking at a card full of dots, and he was able to tell in a flash how many dots there were. So I think this method is dazzling. Now, okay, we come to Jocelyn. Jocelyn, you want to share about your background?
I'm a specialist in early childhood development and education. In the last 20 years, I have added a new role, which is teacher and parent trainer. I train them in brain stimulation, how to develop a more productive side of us, which is knowing how to use our brain, how to cultivate a positive mindset, and also how to educate ourselves all over again as if we are now a baby at 1 year old. Most adults say it's quite a difficult thing to do. However, through our program, our materials that we have created and developed, it is a great possibility today to help people find their new potential.
Alvin and Seng Siew, tell us about how you met.
Seng Siew and I have a very special bond. He's got my back and I got his. Even when I started in business back in 1991, Seng Siew was a friend who just dished out free advice. But when I took on Shichida in 1999, I formalized that by actually retaining him as my legal advisor, and we started a professional relationship from then on. And that's been like ages ago.
I was going to ask you, how did the professional relationship start? And from what you said it was from about 1999 when you formalized it. But even before that, there were many informal advice that you got, which was given without any charge. It does look like your relationship was more friendship first and then business.
Yes, we were friends first, but I think when the engagement became formal, it also became very important for me to then be able to have a little bit of a detachment so that I can give objective advice, all right, unclouded by this question of friendship, because that's important. When when the engagement becomes formal, he's not looking to me just for friendship. He's also looking to me to give him good, solid legal advice so that he can base his commercial decisions on. If the advice I give is colored by friendship, then to me that sort of like puts a taint to the kind of advice I give, and that kind of taint may not be helpful to him making a business decision. So yes, I think that's one of the things that, as a friend, and changing from a friend to a trusted advisor, that kind of objectivity is very important. At least it's important to me.
Well, I want to add that, I mean, sometimes lawyers bring along with them some disrepute. Okay, I mean, there are a lot of situations where people cannot trust lawyers. I've had my share of bad experience as well with lawyers. Okay, so it's very true that it's not easy to trust a lawyer. Your topic today is talking about trusted advisor. I would like to add a word to that: invaluable trusted advisor. Okay, why do I say that? Happy to have somebody like Seng Siew in my life. And to me, professionalism goes beyond just being lawyers, because I was looking for a partner who could look after my interests. You guys got to live, I got to pay you. But at the end of the day, I want somebody who have my back. That in the case of Seng Siew, I actually go to bed soundly each night, knowing that I have somebody taking care of my back. And that makes a lot of difference to me as a businessman, that it's not just having a lawyer who looks at the law, but having somebody who looks at the big picture and is able to take care of my interests from the very beginning. And that's very important.
Can I just add, the ability to be able to understand and look after that big interest doesn't happen overnight. It happens because Alvin has been involving me in his business, in his decision making for a very long time. So I begin to understand his business. I begin to understand how he and Jocelyn thinks as business people. And so therefore, the ability to watch his back improves a lot because I have that background knowledge also. And that makes me a lot more effective and efficient. I don't have to second guess what they are thinking about. And I think to a large extent, they also don't have to second guess what I'm thinking about.
There is a question I actually wanted to ask Seng Siew when he said he needed to take a step back so that he could be more objective when he is rendering his advice. Seng Siew, I wanted perhaps you to explain to the audience, why do you think it is necessary to take a step back? Why do you think the personal sometimes interferes with the professional?
I'll take it from two different points. Okay. First, if we take it from a purely personal angle, then it would basically mean that, I would take on the persona of the business, and therefore I would move the business in the direction that the business wants rather than what is good for the business from a legal standpoint. All right. So in that sense, a degree of objectivity is required. Okay, because otherwise it's, everything you want. Sure, I'll tell you how to go about doing it, but it may not necessarily be the best thing for a business, especially a business that is starting up and growing. All of us hope that they would grow, be big, but the fact of life is that sometimes you make a wrong decision, and sometimes you choose the wrong partners or the wrong co-directors, and then there is a need to see how we can best deal with those kinds of situations. And sometimes the situation can be bad, and we end up going to court. And often, when we talk about shareholders disputes, allegations are about one or more shareholders wrongfully taking money out of the company or diverting business from the company. And very often, these kinds of allegations go back many, many years. So very often, the only way to properly investigate all these allegations of wrongdoing is to bring in forensic accountants. They have the skills and they have the experience to know what to look for. If there is a smoking gun, they'll be the guys who can find it. But very often, it's not about a smoking gun. It's about putting little pieces together, like pieces in a jigsaw, so that, a picture emerges. And if the picture that emerges shows that there has been wrongdoings by a certain group of shareholders, then me as a disputes lawyer will take that over and bring the case and push that case to court. Now, disputes resolution in disputes when we go to court or arbitration or anything like that, it's a very resource-intensive endeavor. And it's not just about money. It's also about time. It's also about emotional input. Because, these were people whom you had trusted when you started your business. And towards the end, these are the people whom you now have a fallout with. Very often, clients have a degree of doubt about whether some of the decisions they made in the past were right or wrong. That affects them. Or sometimes it's the other way around, where they are so bitter, they lose a degree of objectivity. And when they are bitter, their instructions is very often, I will take that person to the end of the world, and I don't care what it costs, I will do it. And sometimes that's not necessarily good for the client. So, as a trusted advisor, it also then becomes very important for me to bring them back to a degree of proportionality or reality, but we need to do that. I need to do that carefully at the right time, because I'm in a position where I understand they're vulnerable, and and they are angry, and but I need them to make the right decision, and I cannot talk to them about this in the wrong time. So if I know the clients well, it's easier for me to gauge and understand his or her mood and when would be the right time for these kinds of conversations to take place. So yeah, being a trusted advisor is also not just about bringing the case to its ultimate end, but trying to tell the client that sometimes a compromise is also good for them. Two, I think and that one is me personally. I think if I don't take that step back, and if I don't take that objective position, and I become very involved in the business, I begin to question my own advice that I give to the client or the business. So that's why that degree of objectivity is required.
If I may interject here, I recall in the past there were numerous occasions where Seng Siew does not hesitate to tell us that what we have is a very bad idea. It's like sometimes, like in my mind, I may have an idea or a scheme, and I think it's great, and maybe there's a lot of merit to it. And when I bring it up, he will give me his very candid opinion. Okay, sometimes to the point of saying that it's a very bad idea, but it's a business decision. You got to take it. You got to make your own. But he has told me what he thought about it, and then that makes me take one step back and see whether I've missed anything, or I've just been looking at things in a very narrow way. And what's great about having somebody like you guys is that you have such vast experience. I mean, you have dealt with so many kinds of situations, so many types of people, in all manners of industries, okay, that you bring to the table an insight that I can never acquire even if I go through, another 3 cycles of career life. And that is really what I appreciate, because then this is an input that I need people to be candid, to tell me it's a bad idea, and then for me to reassess. And that's where we avoid making what you call sometimes costly mistakes.
Both of us are often pretty busy because we have children to manage, we have personal, let's say, matters, etc. But what is interesting, I want to add on, is Seng Siew is our living textbook because there are many types of cases he can remind us, and he also educate us. He is our living encyclopedia, I must say, which make us more or less depend on him most of the time, even from nitty-gritty matters. He can be irritated at times, but I realize that I have to judge where I'm coming from. So when you look at trust, it's a matter I also need to trust myself. I need to trust my views before I approach him. And that makes the whole relationship, whether professional or personal, a very exciting path to have him in our company, in our lives.
Yes, you have answered the question and contributed in such a way that it fits nicely into my next question. Because Seng Siew, a trust relationship is two ways. We have heard from Alvin and Jocelyn, why they trust you. Now, as a trusted advisor, how important is it for you to trust your clients? And then my next question, which is, what is the trust level between you and Alvin and Jocelyn?
You're right, trust works both ways. And where I need to trust them is that when I do give them advice that may be not to their liking, they will take it on board, they will make the assessment, and then they will then make a business decision based on that. Sure, there are times when they would take all the information and make a business decision that is different from what I think is the right one. But once they've made it, I think the ship then needs to sail in the same direction. Okay, and therefore, in that sense, also I need to trust them that they will make a decision, and they need to trust me that when they make that decision, I will also sail along with them.
So the trust is also in their leadership of the business. And because you're such an essential part in a way of the business, as an external consultant, as a trusted advisor, at the end of the day, I mean, whatever decisions were made, then you need to move along with them. I can see that, I can understand that. Having journeyed with Jocelyn and Alvin for so long, Seng Siew, and perhaps with the blessings from Jocelyn and Alvin, do you think you can give us some examples of really trying times that all of you went through together?
I think we are going through that now. I mean, the present COVID situation is trying for all businesses. And I think their business is especially difficult because during the circuit breaker, they were not allowed to open classes. And of course, during that time, the regulations kept changing from day to day. Even I had difficulty trying to keep up with it. So sometimes they ask me, okay, what is the position now? Can I, for example, get my staff together to do materials to distribute to our customers? And I need to look up what the regulations say, and I can look it up in the morning, but there'll be an announcement made in the afternoon and it changes. And sometimes when I go back to them and say, hey, sorry, you can't do it now because things have changed, then everybody, of course, gets heated. So yeah, I think the present situation is a good example of a trying time.
If you talk about this pandemic, yeah, I mean, it impacts everybody. It's pretty bad. A lot of companies are even trying to survive. We are trying to make the best of the situation, but I like to also keep a positive spin to it. Okay, there are a lot others who are worse off than us. We may have all these difficulties and all these obstacles that we got to overcome. We need to maintain the trust of our customers. Okay, that we are doing right by them, that we are still able to serve them and still protect them. And we even have to respect the wishes of those who are ultra careful to say no, it's not good enough. We are talking about lives here, and we want to do what we think is best. We respect that. Okay, so we also had a lot of negative impact from the pandemic. Okay, and things like that happen. We just say, well, do what you need to do. And we will try to do our best to serve those who still continue with us. There are some things that we can do, still do it right. We need as much help as we can, including our trusted advisors, to guide us along through this difficult journey. I'm just thinking about what is it that makes somebody want to engage people like you, to be their trusted advisor. Some people will think that these are bad times. We won't have the budget. Let's not even spend the money. But I like to ask people to think a little bit broader, think outside the box. Actually, we are facing so many challenges in this pandemic. Okay, and all companies are doing the same thing. They are all struggling. Okay, but most of them are. And there are so many challenges that they are facing. New problems cropping up every other day. Okay, and then they have to tackle all these things. And I'm actually thinking about, there is actually a value proposition there. Because if you bring people on board, okay, as a trusted advisor, and this trusted advisor helps you with a new dimension of thinking, and that added dimension that if you are struggling to deal with your problems, and in the pandemic, there are a lot of problems. And if people are struggling to deal with that problem, it may be considered money well spent to actually have somebody like that come on board and actually help to enlighten certain areas, shed light on certain areas, or even to share their experience and say, hey, you know what, I've seen this happening elsewhere, and I think you could try this, or you can do this. And you never know, it could actually be the deciding factor behind whether this company sinks or swims. I have this in my team, but I'm just wondering whether there are actually companies out there that can really benefit from this, that they need to have this mindset change to say, this is not the time where you say, I need to cut costs, I need to just save money. But this is a time where you say, how do I face these challenges and emerge a victor? And this is where I think people should really seriously give this a thought.
Thank you, Alvin. There is a saying, saving money is not necessarily making money. So I think that's a very good point you made. But I can also see it from the point of view of someone who says, look, I'm already going through very difficult times. And if you are suddenly asking me to appoint somebody and hardly perhaps in a position to call himself or herself a trusted advisor, since I don't know you from Adams, then that is also a problem, right? But it actually highlights the fact that when you go through hard times together like this, and there's nothing like having journeyed together when it is very, very trying for the relationship to grow to another level, and usually a much deeper level if it's good. And that's why both of you and all of you, I think I can see your professional relationship, your personal relationship have lasted for what, 30 years?
Well, we have the benefit of history behind us, but I'm thinking more in terms of like people who can benefit from this. Is that if somebody takes this step today, you get thrown into the deep end, you actually go in and actually start fighting to survive. And if you do survive, and I believe that people should give themselves a chance, to survive, they probably will be able to put an extra 5 years on their relationship just out of this, after having gone through this, you might be working together for a year, but you will look like you've been there for 5. That to me is value for money.
Can I add something here? In an emergency situation, in a crisis situation, you don't have to make all the right decisions, so long as most of your decisions are correct. In a crisis situation, what you need to do is make quick decisions. And to be able to make quick decisions, trust that everybody has in one another becomes important. You have to trust that the advice you're getting from me is reasonably accurate. I have to trust that, you would take that on board and then you would act on it, whichever decision you may make. All right. And then once everybody starts moving, sure, the wrong decisions, we wrap it up, we throw it out. The good decisions, we develop it, push that along. And then another crisis will hit. You need to make a whole new set of decisions again. The same process happens again. In the pandemic, that cycle happens in days rather than in weeks or months or years. All right. So I guess if you're asking me what is one good thing that comes out of this pandemic is the fact that, everybody needs to make those kinds of decisions very quickly. And those organizations and companies who can make that quickly with the right people on board are very likely to succeed.
I think with that, we've come to the close of our podcast today. Alvin, Jocelyn, thank you for coming. Seng Siew, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to check out our other episodes as we interview more of our professionals and understand why they could be your first port of call. For any inquiries, do contact our client care specialist, Sandra, at 6221 3009.